There we go. And as usual, you're all practice hands at this point, but I'm going to start with the standard roll call. As usual, there will be two rolls. First roll will be for committee members and alternates of committee members who have RSVP'd to attend the meeting today. The second roll call will be for ACUS members who are not on their committees and any alternates they have designated. So as I run through, please go ahead and unmute.
Conrad, can I just interrupt you? Can I ask everybody to mute? We're hearing some great music in the background. Maybe Greg on your side. Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry, Conrad.
No problem. Yeah, so just please unmute yourself and say here when I call your name so we can just make sure your mic is working. Without further ado, I'll just go ahead and dive into roll call for Administration and Management Committee members. Mr. David Epple.
Here.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us today. Greg Baker.
Here.
Fantastic. Thank you. Bernie Bell. Doesn't look like he's with us yet, but he said he'd be attending. So I'll keep an eye and hopefully he'll be joining us because he's got some comments. John Kamensky.
Here.
Good to see you, John. David Lewis.
Here.
Great to see you, David. Mike Lizaha.
Here. It's Lajaya.
Oh, Lajaya. So sorry about that.
Thank you.
Aaron Nielsen.
Here.
Thanks for joining us. Eloise, our illustrious chair, is obviously present.
I'm here.
Cheryl Stanton.
Here.
Great to see you, Cheryl. Jim Tozy.
Here.
Great to see you, Jim. And then we have two members of ACUS who are not on the committee present today, I believe. Jack Bierman.
Here.
And Matt Weiner.
Here.
Fantastic. Are there any ACUS members present today whose names I have not called?
Yes, and I think I'm on the committee.
Yes. Sorry, Bill. I completely just brushed right over your name. Great to see you today. All right. And with that initial business out of the way, I'll turn things right over to Eloise.
Great. Thanks for that. It's great to see everybody. Happy May. We're here for our third and final meeting, and we're going to get a lot done today. Let me just review the standard information that I have to review about who can speak and about the microphones. So please note that only ACUS members, including government members, public members, senior fellows, liaison representatives, and special counsels, whether or not on the committee, and their designated alternates have full speaking privileges. To avoid background noise, please keep your microphone on mute and either use Zoom's hand raise feature or add a comment in the chat if you'd like to speak, but only say you'd like to be recognized in the chat. Don't put your substantive comment in the chat. I'll then call on you. You can unmute yourself. Once unmuted, please state your name and membership affiliation before providing your comments. And once you've concluded your remarks, please remember to remute yourself to cut down on background noise. I'd ask that ACUS members and their designated alternates use the webcam to facilitate conversation whenever possible. With respect to attendees other than ACUS members and alternates, participation requires the unanimous consent of committee members. So time permitting, I'll consider calling on such attendees at appropriate points. We'll presume that committee members consent absent their raising an objection. If any such participant would like to speak, please so indicate again by using Zoom's hand raise feature or by so indicating in the chat feature, and I'll call on you and then you can unmute and then please again remute when you're done speaking. I already indicated as much, but I will read the formal language. For all participants, please use the chat feature only to indicate that you'd like to speak, or for committee members and their alternates to vote when asked. Please do not hold any sidebar discussions or put substantive comments in the chat feature. Today we are going to vote, so I'll remind you that as a reminder, only members of the Committee on Administration and Management may cast a vote when one is called for. Please don't vote unless you're a member of the committee, and we have a list of committee members in case you are unsure. So that is the conclusion of our formal kind of check marks of what's required for me to say before we actually get started. So I think we'll go ahead and get started, although I do see, welcome Bernie, great to see you. So Bernie, Conrad, can you make sure that you've got Bernie in the roll call now? Okay, and then I think we're ready to have you share your screen. Great. So when we last met, we had completed consideration of the recommendations, and there were 4 revisions delegated to the Committee on Style that affect or amend the recommendations in some way. And so I want to just really quickly go through them and make sure everybody is okay with what we have done. And then we'll turn to the central focus of this meeting, which is to work on the preamble. So let's start. Conrad, I take Bernie's periodically should, as opposed to should periodically, to be committed. Like, we can just accept that. I don't think anybody's going to object to that. So that isn't one that we actually have to discuss. But we did discuss last time. Dave Lewis had kind of puzzled the order in which we discussed how we were talking about creating performance goals and then collecting data and then revising performance goals and then thinking about whether we're meeting them. And so I want to just show you what we did and make sure everybody's okay with it. So I know everybody could sort of see this when can you just scroll up atop to the beginning part of what we did, Conrad? So 9, we separated out the adoption of performance goals from the reassessment of what those performance goals should be. So the recommendation now flows from we agencies adopt performance goals. And then recommendation 10 is about the data that we worked on. Then recommendation is about evaluating whether they're meeting performance goals. That hasn't changed its location, but then we reinserted here. Agencies should reassess performance goals periodically. So there's an opportunity to decide whether you want to change the performance goals. So that's how we kind of reordered the structure of how the performance goals, the data collection, and then rethinking performance goals goes. Does this look okay with anybody? Does anybody want to offer any objection? Because if not, I think we're going to deem it accepted and move on. Dave, I know you, I think we're okay with it. I see a thumbs up from Bill. Dave, thumbs up from you. Okay, so unless anybody wants to say anything else about this new order, I think we're good with that. Okay, Conrad, to the next one, which was, I believe, this paragraph that we've spent so much time on thinking about how to make sure that we're providing training in the right way. So we tried to streamline it and make it work grammatically, and also keep the substance, but also not duplicate substance that already existed in the substantive recommendations. So I just want to make sure that everybody is okay with what we currently have, which Bernie added back in a line that we had kind of lost from Cheryl and smoothing over. So I'm good with what it currently says, but I know everybody always has thoughts about how we can maybe make things better. So I just want to take a beat and see if anybody wants to say anything about how C currently reads. Michael?
Yes, just wasn't sure. I mean, synchronously or asynchronously, I don't know if there are better ways to say that. That doesn't strike me as plain language. Maybe that.
Okay, that's totally fine. That is a artifact of being a professor during the Zoom era, where it was sort of like, are you teaching synchronously or are you teaching asynchronously? So I think that was proposed by maybe Dave last time, and then I put it in as a committee on style thing because it made sense to me. If that's not kind of like a standard plain language thing in the post-pandemic Zoom era, then I have no kind of claim on that. What I was just trying to get at is before we were talking about recorded versus online, and that didn't make sense because recorded things are also going to be online. So we could say online, live, or pre-recorded. Does that work? Okay, Bill, I see your hand up.
I thought asynchronously or synchronously was fine. I mean, I agreed. I'm a law professor, but nevertheless, I think that is plain language for what you're trying to get across. I didn't have a problem.
Okay, but do you have a problem with live or pre-recorded? Which also gets at the same thing. Bill, do you have a problem with that? Or, sorry, you're on mute.
No problem.
Okay. David. I think you're on mute too. David, we can't hear you, even though you seem to no longer be on mute. Is the sound on your computer on? We still can't hear you, but we did hear you when you said you were present. No, we still can't hear you. Okay, I'm gonna waive my please don't put substantive comments in the chat request. If you would like to put your substantive comment in the chat, please feel free. Everybody, do not take this as a global license to put substantive comments in the chat. But I think in this instance where we have a mic problem, that works just fine. So go ahead, David. In the meantime, does anybody else have anything else that they want to say about this thing? Andy?
I see an open parentheses in line 173. Is there a closed parentheses anywhere?
There is at the end of line 176.
Ah, okay, I see it. Thank you.
Okay, Cheryl, making sure that this is capturing your, you sort of had the lead pen in a lot of ways. Okay, thanks for the thumbs up. Okay, so it looks like David is typing. Conrad, what's the next thing we have to move to here? Is it just the last? Oh no, let's take a look at that while David is typing. So the last section that we had, we tinkered with a little bit, was we had wondered whether ACUS had any previous experience or previous examples of directing particular entities in Congress to do certain things, or whether you know, or whether we mostly speak to Congress. And so we do mostly speak to Congress. We couldn't find any example of a specific direction to any particular component to do something. So we rephrased it not to be that the House's office or the Senate's office should do this, but rather Congress should consider directing its training or administrative entities, such as the blah, blah, which we thought kind of was better in keeping with how ACUS has historically done things. And then Bernie suggested that we slightly expand the last section, the last sentence, or the last clause, I guess it is, by adding the word including, because we don't want to be limiting agencies from cooperating. We generally want agencies to cooperate with whatever the congressional entities would find helpful in terms of getting the SOPs out there. So the including would not be limited to just sharing the SOPs. So with that background, does this look okay? Any reactions from people? Bernie, I hope I summarized your intent okay. I guess I could have called on you to do that. I'm looking around.
Yes, you did. And it looks great.
Okay, thanks. Looking around to see if anybody has any comments. Matt?
I would suggest changing entities to offices.
Okay, great. Anything else? Okay, so Conrad, I think we can go ahead and accept this. I think if you kind of contain the whole thing.
I'm sure there's a more efficient way of doing
Yeah,
it.
there is.
Yeah.
Okay,
Apologies.
if you just like select the whole sentence and click accept changes, you can do all of them at once. Okay, let's go back to David's comment now for that 14, what about providing training or other events? So I take the thrust of David's comment to be, David, hold on, I can't now see you on the screen. Oh, I saw you, I see you on the screen now. Okay, you wanna try speaking? Just in case, maybe it magically worked? No, it still doesn't work. Okay, all right, so I take the thrust of David's comment to be that since this applies to all agencies, should we not start with agencies that regularly, since at the end only in the parenthetical, we call out a certain thing for agencies that frequently provide a high volume of casework requests. And his suggestion is that agencies that don't frequently handle casework probably don't need to provide training. So we did spend a fair amount of time discussing this at the last meeting. And so maybe I would call on Cheryl to see if you have a reaction to David's suggestion. And then obviously opening it up to anybody else too. But Cheryl, I think you were kind of the primary driver of some of this substance. And so I want
Yeah,
to start with you.
I think that I don't know how to say this. So I think the presumption of the paper feels like, and maybe I have this wrong, that we want as many agencies as possible to provide guidance so that even if it's a one-off or infrequently, they can get it. The people in Congress know who to get it to and how efficiently. We really were honing in on, as the exception, like the 5% that do 80% or whatever the numbers were we were throwing around last time. So I'd hate to exclude any amount of agencies because I think this paper wants to talk about all agencies with casework. But now I'm probably on other people's turf by saying that.
So I welcome other comments at this point. Bernie?
Yes, just looking back at the main section of 14, it starts with options for fostering such relationships. So an agency that doesn't need to do trainings or very rarely has a congressional request, they have the option of not doing the training. So since it's not mandatory, this is a list of suggestions. I think it should be read as basically this is one option. Generally, agencies should consider providing training, but if you don't have enough casework to do it, then there's nothing here that says that you have to. And then by specifying what agencies that have a lot of casework should do, we kind of by implication are saying the earlier portion of C is for agencies that don't have a lot frequent casework requests. So, I don't really see the addition as necessary, but if someone feels strongly about it, I guess it's not.
And when you say
harmful either.
addition, sorry, when you say addition, do you mean David's comments in the chat, or do
addition.
you? Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
I guess
think that's covered.
Great. And the other thing I would say, in addition to what Cheryl and Bernie have said, I don't know if this is also helpful, David, and then I'll see if anybody else wants to speak, or David, if you want to respond in the chat, if you're okay with this, is that we were trying to distinguish between the run-of-the-mill agencies and agencies that do this a lot, with the point being that for agencies that do this a lot, although we're a little agnostic as to how they do it for ordinary agencies, for agencies that do it a lot, we really want to make sure that they think about doing it often and in a way that's live or in person, so that it can be a dialogue rather than just like a recorded list of information about how to handle that. So does anybody else want to comment? Or David, does this look okay to you with that as a background? And either comment in the chat or give a thumbs up. Conrad, I do notice that we have a residual word in line 175 that is synchronously, and it should be live. Okay, so it seems like David's okay with the paragraph as it is. So unless anybody else wants to say anything, I think we're good with accepting it. And so Conrad, why don't you just try kind of, copying all of section C and seeing if you can do a global accept at that point. Okay. Mastery. Well done. Okay, so I think Conrad does not take us through all of the remaining bits in the recommendations itself. Okay, so then let's go back to the preamble. We have a lot of comments on the first paragraph. And so I think I want to just say there's fewer comments proposed in the second paragraph. So I think it's okay if we spend a fair amount of time on this first paragraph. Let's really try to get it right. It's what's introducing things. So in a way, I think maybe let's even just go sentence by sentence. Although some of the comments I think are involving interlocking things. So we'll have to make sure that we get those too. So I'm going to read out loud. I'm sorry, but I can't think of a better way of doing it for this particular thing. So, okay, David, thanks for letting us know. We'll welcome you back when you come back. Since the country's earliest years, constituent services have been a cornerstone of the representational activities of members of Congress. So we didn't get any comments on that sentence. Are we good with it? We like representational. We like anything else people want to say? All right, moving on. Thousands of people each year contact their elected representatives for help while interacting with federal agencies and the programs they administer. Good? Don't be shy.
How about, and instead of agency, the programs they administer, just say, and their programs.
Works for
Interacting
me.
with federal agencies and their programs.
Works for me. Anybody else? Okay. Michael?
Just wondering if while should say with. Either one probably works, but just wanted to offer that up.
I wonder if the double with is then an awkwardness for help with
Yeah.
interacting with federal agencies. I think I might prefer sticking with while, if that's okay with you.
That's
Okay,
fine.
John? Thanks, Michael. John?
Same word, and for help in interacting as opposed to while or with.
May I suggest that maybe we don't even need a word? What if it just says for help interacting with? How about that?
That's
Can we do
even
that?
better.
Okay. Great. So I think for help interacting with federal agencies and their programs. Okay, I apologize for not submitting this in advance, but I wanted to suggest that that the next sentence defines casework requests without also embedding the definition in a broader substantive sentence. So I wanted to propose that this sentence read something like, this recommendation refers to these requests as constituent services or casework requests.
As
And then what you have.
Yeah.
And then what you have. And then just, yeah. And then hit a period in line 8 after don't have it, the M- reopen up. So I'm suggesting that because I think that in providing a definition embedded in a larger substantive recommendation is doing two things. And so maybe it's better to provide the definition first. What do people think about this sentence as it currently stands? This
says
Go ahead,
these requests, but we haven't used the term request earlier. So maybe it should
Okay,
be refers to these contacts, which is the term we've used before.
yes, great. Perfect. And then it also avoids duplicating requests twice in the sentence. So, and it should be this recommendation, not this recommendations in line 5. Okay, this recommendation refers to these contacts as constituent service or casework requests. That is, requests submitted to an agency by congressional staff on behalf of constituents seeking assistance with accessing federal programs or navigating adjudicative and other similar administrative processes. Okay, we good with that? Okay. So then we turn to a comment from Jack Bierman. Jack, are you still here? Yes, you are. I will let you introduce your point about also, that we need a thing to come before the also.
Okay, it's been rewritten since then, so let me take a look and see where I am. I'm sorry, I'm staring right at the request submitted to the agency on behalf of the city. Well, see, that
Your point is just that, yeah.
Yeah, because as originally was, we didn't have a definition of what we were really mainly aimed at. So now it's better, but yeah, I'm having trouble now because it's being rewritten.
So, but could we just delete the also? Your concern was about the also.
Well, but I think so I think everything in the paragraph, that should be the last sentence in the paragraph. That's what I sent in it's in there somewhere above. That, in my opinion, this should be the last sentence in the paragraph. The main part of the paragraph should talk about the constituent services. So my suggestion was that the sentence about ideally, that starts with ideally, ideally the resolution of it, and that should come next, in my opinion.
And can you take us through why?
Because I think that the whole, I mean, I think it's a design. Okay, so the reason agencies depend on constituent services like this is because Congress does, it's built into the design of administrative programs for Congress to be able to get support from constituents by getting them through the agency, the rigors of dealing with an agency. That ideally, it would be better if no one had to go to a member of Congress. And, you know, the thing is, when you go to one member of Congress, if there's any policy implications of what's going on, then this is a distortion of the democratic process, because you don't know whether that particular member of Congress's view on behalf of some constituent represents anything other than that one particular member of Congress's view. So insofar as agencies are more responsive to members of Congress than they are to just members of the public, that's in my opinion, that's a negative feature of the administrative state. That said, we can't really do without it, because members of Congress tend to be more responsive in many situations because they depend on this constituent loyalty for votes. But putting that aside, the whole theoretical thing aside, the main focus of this recommendation is how the process of getting help for constituents ought to work. The business about learning more about how the agencies work is like a positive externality of it. It's a positive side effect. So I would leave that for last. I don't think that's the focus of this recommendation at all. That's my opinion. You know, I'm just one person, but.
So I would welcome comments in response to that, but I guess I'd also suggest that we could think about, okay, good, I see some hands. So Bernie and Michael.
So I think the reorganization is worth trying. If we do that, I would then follow up for the introduction to this plays an important role sentence by saying something like, however, in practice, casework requests, and then play, and then on with the rest, an important role.
Like I did suggest a reordering of the sentences. I don't think I changed anything of substance in what's now on the right side of the screen. And I mean, not that I have pride of authorship in it, but I think maybe that's capturing what Bernie is saying. And so if we could try that, maybe it would work.
Yeah, I'd be comfortable with trying some of that, especially the reordering, and seeing if it works. Because I hear that it's getting at some of the similar things. Bernie, I didn't take you to be objecting to the substance of that. So
I don't really think there's any substance difference here. I just think it's organization. And I guess the one thing we need to think about is we're kind of assuming that everyone agrees with this last sentence. But I don't know if everyone does, or whether that sentence itself is controversial. Even though I drafted it.
One way, well, we draft things for discussion, right? So one way of thinking about the proposed order of operations then is we define it, and then we say, ideally it shouldn't matter, but it's sometimes helpful. I'm kind of combining Jack's and what we currently have. And casework can be helpful for agency oversight, and it can also be helpful for agencies because it can tee up issues. So that's the sort of the four-prong logic of what Jack is suggesting that we move through. Ideally, it shouldn't matter, but it sometimes can be helpful. Here's how it could be good for congressional oversight. Here's why agencies might also benefit. Okay, so that's one way of thinking about it.
My only preference in that would be to put the congressional part last. But that's just a minor
okay. Sure. So ideally we wouldn't need it, but it sometimes can be helpful. Here's how it can be helpful to agencies. Here's how it can be helpful to Congress. Michael?
Yes, I don't have thoughts on the order. I think I wanted to raise a point about the substance
Okay,
the-
let's talk about the substance because I think that is kind of affecting how we're thinking about what to lead with in the order.
So, so I do understand the point that's trying to be conveyed, obviously, with agencies that are administering benefits or services to individuals. I understand how they are in many ways closer to the individual than maybe the representative is. I'm wondering if thought has been given to how this would impact other types of agencies, for example, law enforcement agencies. So like the agency I work at is a law enforcement agency. We are situated differently to individuals than members of Congress. We are supposed to be enforcing laws in the public interest. We don't necessarily represent specific constituencies. So if a constituent calls and asks us, why aren't you bringing this law enforcement action? I think I was defrauded, for example. We can't necessarily tell them why we're not bringing a case. That's non-public. There could be statutory, protections that would apply. And I'm sure this applies to other law enforcement agencies as well. And we actually have a rule in our agency saying we don't adjudicate private controversies. So I don't know if thought had been given to how this recommendation could affect law enforcement agencies. I just wanted to raise that for the group because they might be situated differently than some of the other agencies that were called out on page 2, like VA, other agencies that are providing benefits or services. So, so that was a comment that I had. I think the sentence as it's written, I think obviously, and the assumption behind it is that agencies are going to be explaining to individuals why they're not taking action. I understand that in certain contexts. I don't know if that applies, for example, in the law enforcement context. So I don't have, specific edits unless, maybe that's, I don't know if folks have reactions to that, but that's a comment I have for the group.
Sean, I might ask you to respond to what Michael has just said from the law enforcement perspective, law enforcement agency perspective. Sean Keeley, there you are.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm not quite sure. I think I'd have to think about that.
So, I guess as a first stab at this, some of the recommendations themselves talk about reasons why agencies can't respond. And so I think Michael's substantive comment might be accounted for in that aspect of it. Is there, if we're accounting for it in the substantive recommendation by kind of explaining that agencies might be in that kind of position, does that affect your thinking about whether there needs to be some attention to it in this sentence, in the preamble, Michael?
I think I need to think about that more. I think it could be helpful somewhere in the preamble to maybe call out that point. I'm sorry.
Okay.
That's language.
So let's.
Maybe that would be the perfect to deal with it.
I might ask you to think about if there's a place that it fits where we're talking about the other agencies, right? The ones you just singled out, because maybe there's some sentence doing some kind of carve out that you could propose that we could talk about substantively. Let me go to Bernie, and then I want to go back to revising the paragraph at hand.
So I would suggest maybe to deal with Michael's concern, we might revise the sentence to say, ideally, in most circumstances. And so that suggests that there will be other circumstances, such as potentially law enforcement circumstances where that wouldn't be the case. And substantively, Michael's comment kind of brings to mind a reaction that, well, do we actually want the result to be different if someone who's defrauded goes to law enforcement agency, the law enforcement agency refuses to open an investigation, but if they go to Congress, then the law enforcement agency would open the investigation. I'm not sure that's ideal. The explanation to the member of Congress might be somewhat different from the constituent because the law enforcement agency may be willing to be more frank with a member of Congress. But I think that's kind of provided for by saying ideally it should be roughly equivalent. And the concept of roughly equivalent meant there are going to be some things that agencies will share with members of Congress that they're not going to share with an individual, whether it's, you know, Social Security case or a suggested criminal prosecution. So I hope at least that addresses some of Michael's concerns and perhaps assuages all of them.
Thanks, Bernie. Michael, I'll call on you in a second, but let me get to Bill next.
Well, I was going to question Michael with the question, if an individual writes in and says, why aren't you prosecuting somebody? Your response may be, sorry, we don't answer questions like that. But if a member of Congress says a constituent of mine wants to know why you're not prosecuting somebody, aren't you going to say exactly the same thing back to the Congress staff person?
Yes, unless they subpoena us, or, you know, there's circumstances where Congress could get certain information. But yes, the answer would be roughly equivalent. But I think what was driving my comment was there was I think there was a comment maybe from Bernie in the written comments that they're owed an explanation for a failure to respond. So that was sort of what was driving my concern. But no,
well, let me address that a different way then,
Yeah.
because
Okay.
I had a sort of a separate issue with this sentence,
Okay.
because I thought it was long and complicated. I thought the resolution of the individual's issue, period, should be roughly equivalent. So whatever the issue is, whether it's a request for action, whether it's whatever the individual's issue is. I mean, this is a preamble. We don't have to be technical about this. Should be roughly equivalent to whether that individual seeks assistance from their elected representative, instead seeks assistance from agency personnel. I also think you could take out ombud or, and I don't understand, or seeks no assistance at all. I mean, I think for the same as if you seek assistance from agency personnel, period. I mean, agency ombudsman is agency personnel. And I don't know why it shouldn't be the equivalent of a knowledgeable person, private person. I don't understand that language.
Yeah, who drafted that? What was going on? What was going on in that? Is that Conrad? Is that you, or was it
no, that
John?
that content was initially
Okay.
shifted from an amendment proposed by Bernie that resulted in the insertion of language about you know, retrospective review of or rather assessing whether constituent service requests might be indicators of broader policy or programmatic issues.
Oh, right. Okay. Okay. So we've dealt with that elsewhere. So this holdover language may no longer be important. If we were to, Bernie, would that, like, what if we, Jack, I see I'll call on you in a second, but what if, was there something that's still important in your proposal that's in line 11, 12 in the brackets?
Sorry, I just realized I completely misspoke. I misattributed Bernie's comment. That's
Oh.
elsewhere. This was
Not
a
Bernie.
standalone amendment that he proposed to the preamble. Sorry about that.
Okay, but not connected to anything else. Okay.
Okay, because I think I had proposed this previously for another section.
Yeah, it was initially proposed to appear here.
Oh, okay.
Right. And we just
but-
moved it up because of Jack's suggestion that we think about reordering.
Okay, so, yeah. So regardless of the history, so I'm fine with changing to the issue and eliminating some of that verbiage. Let's see, with regard to roughly equivalent, whether the individual seeks assistance from legislative or seeks assistance from agency personnel. So I conceived of this as seeks assistance from agency programmatic personnel, as opposed to an agency ombuds whose job it is to intercede within the agency with programmatic officials. So I think those two are different sorts of agency personnel with different functions. So that's why I have something that appears to be a duplicate, but I don't really conceive of it being duplicate. Or knowledgeable private representative. Yeah, I mean, I think it certainly should apply. They should get a roughly equivalent response. I wouldn't assume that an agency would be as frank even with a knowledgeable private representative as they might be with a member of Congress for, the member of Congress's ears only. And then, or seeks no assistance at all, meaning no assistance from a member of Congress, an ombuds, or a knowledgeable private representative, and just proceeds essentially on their own through the regular agency process. So that was the intention of this language. And so, I could certainly entertain additional modifications, but I think in some ways, all of those elements I think are important.
Okay, thanks for that explanation. We have a lot of people to talk, and I'm going to call on them in a second. But in the meantime, Conrad, it looks like Bernie would be fine with in lines 9 through 10, Xing out what you put in the bracket there. So let's just delete that as it was proposed by somebody, and it seems to be okay. No, that one he has not approved. So I want to keep that there for discussion. The resolution of an individual's issue was the only one that I was leaving. Okay, so let's keep that second set of brackets, and let's turn to Jack now.
Okay, now I tried to make as little change as possible in the language when I did the reordering, but
So
I actually, I mean, if this is all on the table, I want to say two things, something about this language. But first, I want to point out that I did propose an additional sentence, which would come after this, which says the positive case about constituent services, that however, these constituent services, and then I redefined it because it hadn't been defined yet, but now that's all taken care of. Often appear to be helpful in ensuring appropriate and transparent agency action. So
okay, so Conrad, just put that on the screen. That's now lines 12 and 11.
That's the positive case for this. Was that already in there?
No, he just put it in right now as you were talking.
Okay,
he just put it in right
so
now
that
as you
I
were
think
talking.
should come after this sentence. Now, this sentence that we've been wrestling with, I think, first of all, that private representatives are irrelevant to the focus of this proposal and shouldn't be mentioned at all. That is, whether you have difference in when you're represented by an attorney before a adjudicatory body, or hire a lawyer or something like that. That's not what this is about. I don't think we should mention it. I also think that ombud is included within the broad category of agency personnel. So I wouldn't separately mention that. So I would say, ideally, in most circumstances, resolution of an individual's issue should be, I don't even like roughly equivalent, because it really should be the same. So I would say should not depend on whether that individual seeks assistance from their elected representatives, or instead deals only with agency personnel, interacts only with agency personnel, something like that. I think that captures the thought.
Okay.
And I don't think any of the rest of it is relevant. And then I would have my next sentence.
Okay, let's hold on your next sentence, Jack. Sorry, hold on your next sentence.
Yeah.
Conrad
Okay.
is typing. So let's get Conrad's.
I got up to should not depend on whether the individual seeks assistance from their elected representative or
interacts only
or
with.
interacts only with agency personnel.
Okay, and so then it's bracketed language. Be roughly okay, great. So that's sort of one way of thinking about it. Okay, and then sorry. Then you wanted to talk more about the next sentence. Would you see these two sentences as going together? So the line 13, 14 sentences, however, these casework requests often appear to be helpful in ensuring appropriate and transparent agency action. So Jack, did you want to talk about that one then?
Yeah, well, I just think that's the positive point we're trying to make in this whole recommendation. And it wasn't really said in the original opening
Okay.
paragraph. So I think that's
And
an important thought to include.
Is transparent? I don't quite get transparent after appropriate. Isn't it just appropriate? We're not like these casework requests aren't being made public. So what do you mean by transparent? Isn't it just appropriate agency action?
I mean, the reason I put transparent is because sometimes it's just a question of getting an answer or getting information. But I'm fine with appropriate agency action. That's
Okay,
fine.
I would say appropriate captures that. It's like being responsive is appropriate.
Okay,
I think it might be
That's-
embedded.
that's fine. Perfect.
Okay, all right. So both of these two sentences are now what we're talking about. Dave and then Bill and then Michael.
I have to say, I just wonder whether this is a judgment we need to make at all. I'm not sure we need to, like, I'm not sure it helps the purpose of the recommendation to say that everybody should be treated, equally, whether a member of Congress weighs in or not. Like, that's not a fight we need to have, because people do ask their members of Congress for help. And because that's the case, we're giving advice about how to do that well. The reason I say that is, having worked for a member of Congress doing casework requests back in the day, they like to get special treatment and they like to be able to push people up to the front of the line. And I don't want to argue with them about whether that's an appropriate form of representation or not, because they might think actually it is an appropriate form of representation. Certainly if the White House called and said, we want to move somebody up to the front of the line or make their case go through more quickly, we would have less concern. And if that's the case, then why wouldn't somebody, say, sitting on an oversight committee or an elected representative that's supposed to govern these agencies, have some say in how they do stuff? So my view would be, I don't think this sentence is necessary at all. I don't think we need to say whether, we don't need to take a position on whether they should be treated the same as people who don't approach their member of Congress. I agree normatively, but I don't think it's something we need to, I don't see why it's in here at all.
Okay, so your proposal then is to take out both of these sentences, the Bernie sentence and the Jack sentence. So you would cut from that what's currently highlighted at lines 8 through 14, and then after defining casework, we would then just say kind of what value casework plays in terms of might reveal stuff to agencies about broader systemic problems, and then what it might be helpful for oversight in Congress. Is that?
That's right.
Yeah.
And
okay.
Jack may prove me change my mind, so I could be
okay.
wrong,
Yeah.
just...
I don't consider this conversation to be done. I'm just trying to get the views on the screen. Okay, so let's go to Bill and then Michael, and then sort of see where we are.
Well, I'll speak in favor of Jack's thing and why it's not necessary to put in here, but I think it's helpful and appropriate. And it's not a criticism of Congress, it's a criticism of agencies. It's saying that, agencies should operate in a way that you don't have to have somebody weigh in on the behalf of individuals. So this is really a criticism, not of Congress at all, but of agencies. And it's the fact that Congress will help the agency work is what's in that second sentence that Jack put in. So I think I'm fully happy with what Jack has proposed here and would support it.
Okay, thanks for that, Bill. Michael.
Good conversation. I would just say, I think David raised a good point. I've also worked in the legislative branch, and I know some members take great pride in their constituent services. So I don't know how members of Congress would perceive that sentence, but I think David raised a good point that we might want to think about. If the sentences stay in, I do think adding in most circumstances help to address the concern I raised earlier. And I think changing it from agency action to issue, I think also helps address the concern I raised. I wouldn't be in favor of changing roughly equivalent to same, which I think Jack Bierman suggested, because Congress has subpoena power over agencies. They can get information that the public cannot. So I just don't think that would be legally accurate. So those are my thoughts.
So I don't think he said same. It said the proposed language is that let's just make sure that you are, it should not depend on whether the individual seeks assistance from their elected representative or interacts only with agency
Okay.
personnel. Is that different for you? Because this goes to Bill Funk's point, which is that it's actually a critique of agencies, that agencies should just do the work and not require Congress to.
Yeah, no, I see the point. I think David also raised a good point. I don't have sort of a firm view, and I think I could see the reason for taking it out for the reason David raised.
Okay, no, I get that, but you had objected, your smaller point was objecting to
Yeah.
the language same
Yes,
because of
because
subpoena power.
I thought Professor Bierman said same, but I think he may have
Okay,
withdrawn.
but so on that smaller point that, okay, great, so you withdrew that point because this language is not that. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, Sean and then Dave.
Yeah, while I appreciate Dave's pragmatism, I would argue for keeping Jack's sentence in there in some form, simply because it conforms to the ethics rules for Congress. That and from our research goes along with what many constituent service people in Congress are taught and trained on, is that their intervention shouldn't move somebody to the head of the line. It's more, fixing a problem that's going on within the agency or trying
Okay,
to get a case looked at. So I would keep it.
okay, and that's in your report, so it's bolstered by the report. Is that? Yeah, okay. Can I just, one point of clarification is I believe the first sentence is actually Bernie's sentence and it's the second sentence that's Jack. So just to sort of be attributing who did what, I think it was Bernie's suggestion that we talk about the kind of, it shouldn't depend on leveraging support from Congress. And it was Jack's suggestion that we provide the affirmative positive case. So just being clear about that. Okay, let's go to Dave next.
All right, I don't want to belabor this point, and I will stop talking after this. Having worked in cases where I've asked for the same information as House committees and seen agencies not be able to differentiate whether a request is from a House committee or from a random member of the public like me, I get concerned when they don't prioritize requests from members of Congress over regular members of the public. And I think it is appropriate in many cases for them to prioritize the requests of members of Congress over members of the public because of their representational responsibility. And I will stop there.
Thanks for that, Dave. So Aaron, I'm going to call on you. Bernie, I'll call on you. Andy, I'm not going to call on you because you don't have to speak if you don't want to. But since you did give us such helpful insight from your position as chair interacting with Congress, I would love to get your take on this also after I call on these two people. So if you want to share. So
Sure.
Aaron, and then
I appreciate that, Eloise. Thank you. I prefer it not be there along the lines of what Dave Lewis is talking about. I think he's right. And I'm not sure reading it this way, and members are not going to go back to the report and all that. I think it's not clear that the sentiment is directed to agencies, and this will be telling the congressional inquirers that we're not going to do exactly what you're asking us to do. Yeah, I'm in the Dave Lewis camp, but not as strongly as I was the other day.
okay, all right, that's useful input. Aaron and then Bernie.
Yeah, I'm with Bernie and Jack. I think it's important. I would also say that I think one of the concerns that some people have is that regulators receive discretion just so that they can perform constituent service for Congress. So in other words, the worry is that we have laws just so Congress can move people up along the line. And that is very problematic. I think a lot of people, maybe I'm too cynical, but I think I've seen that in the literature, that is one of the feedback loops that creates some problems. So I don't know if it makes it through the plenary. I don't know if it makes it through today, but I'm sympathetic to the idea that no, we think as a principle that it should stand whatever, agencies should do what they should do. And it shouldn't be because Congress is pressuring them, because if you open up that door, then it's going to encourage Congress to have some leverage that maybe isn't beneficial.
Okay, thanks for that view. Bernie?
Yeah, I would just emphasize again the language of roughly equivalent, which is why I would not go as far as Jack does, by saying it shouldn't depend on who's making the requests. So maybe roughly equivalent doesn't capture how much discretion an agency has and responded differently to a member of Congress than an individual. But if the answer is no when when an individual makes the request, and yes when a member of Congress makes the request, I mean, ideally, that's the sort of thing that really shouldn't happen. And again, the sentence starts with ideally recognizing that there is a reason why there are casework requests to Congress. As a practical matter, it probably does make a difference, but to the extent possible, agencies should try to reach an ideal state of giving the same answers to people, whether they have a congressperson behind them or not, but being certainly willing to be more frank with, more open with a member of Congress, particularly if the agency wants to talk with a member of Congress for their ears only, and not necessarily communicate with them in a way that will get back to the constituent. I just think as a practical matter, we can't possibly say that agencies shouldn't do that. So that's what I have to say.
Okay, thanks. I want to call on Jim and Jack next, but Sean, can I ask you to find where in the report there might be a citation to the underlying, like you said, it was consistent with training or something. I'm wondering if there's a way to assuage Andy's concern and Dave's concern, if there is some actual kind of like House or Senate training on casework that is directly responsive to that. So I don't know if you could find some citation. You'll take a look. Okay, if you could take a look now for that while we're continuing the conversation, I think that would be a really helpful addition. So thanks for that. Okay, Jim.
I'm just wondering if members of congressional staff were attending this meeting and if they would agree with the recommendation or the inferences from the recommendation that they're not entitled to getting to the front of the line. You know, none of us have been elected. None of the public that's rights to the Congresses are elected. They won a tough race, and if they do things wrong, they're out of a job. None of us are. So I'm just wondering if they sat around here, this table, and if they read it, whether they would be in agreement with the thrust of this discussion.
Yeah, so I think we're all just talking about what is like justice and political trade-offs is kind of how I'm thinking about the conversation thrust. Okay, Jack and then Bill. Jack,
I want to say, I want to say that I think there are circumstances in which the result ought to be different when it's a member of Congress. And I'll give two. One is if a member of Congress asks for information from an agency, I could imagine dozens of circumstances in which the agency ought to give that information to a member of Congress, but maybe should not give it to a member of the public unless they go through a FOIA request and it meets the meets the definition of agency records under FOIA. I also think, like, for example, if someone wants a private bill to get themselves resident alien status, they can't. The agency's not going to do that on its own. It's going to only do that in response to a request from a member of Congress. I mean, that's how that whole process works. So I'm not totally in disagreement with the notion that there are circumstances. That's why the sentence says in most circumstances. Now, maybe the word ideally ought to come out, because the truth is, in most circumstances, the resolution of an issue shouldn't depend on whether someone went to their member of Congress. Obviously the members of Congress are proud of their constituent services, but all they're really doing is getting agencies to do what they should have done in the first place on their own, except in some circumstances. But I think once you say in most circumstances, I think the roughly equivalent language is not helpful, whereas just saying should not depend captures the thought. I do think that there are many circumstances in which it's inappropriate for a member of Congress to get action when a member of the public couldn't. And there's situations where a member of Congress sicks law enforcement on someone they don't like, who's on the other side of the political spectrum and also is a shady character, where they might get action where an individual complaining about it won't. And I think that's a bad feature. So I think there are circumstances in which this captures something important, but that said, the recommendation would be fine without this thought at all. I do think it needs my second sentence to just explain that in some circumstances this is good. And I think the fact that it works and is helpful is sort of balances out any negative connotation by this first sentence. So maybe the word ideally is the problem, but I would leave it in some, in some form.
Okay, so could you bracket Conrad? Thank you, Jack. If you could bracket, okay, you took it out. All right. Bill, and then maybe Sean, if you have a citation, that would be great. Bill.
Well, I still like keeping it in because I did not read it as saying that, well, when the agency doesn't give the response it should be giving, it's entirely appropriate for Congress to raise the priority, put some leverage on it. I don't see that as that this language that we put that Jack and I and Bernie have suggested be in there is inconsistent with the idea that when the agency fails to meet up to this ideal requirement, or that it's appropriate for Congress to put a thumb on the scale. So I don't think it's inconsistent with that at all.
Okay, so the language from the report that Sean just put in the chat. So this is a rare moment where I'll invite people to look at the chat for substance. Is a challenge facing congressional offices when performing casework is the common public perception that members of Congress can initiate a broad array of actions resulting in a speedy, favorable outcome. Ethical rules, along with federal laws and regulations, however, curtail this ability. Members and their staff cannot force an agency to expedite a case or decide a constituent's case favorably. Congressional staff, therefore, often see a primary function of their job to be managing constituents' expectations. I wonder if a footnote with that as a parenthetical after the Bernie sentence would help alleviate some of the concerns of these in this
just
regard.
a note, Eloise.
Yeah,
that's the footnotes didn't come across here, but they're all this is all drawn from the 2022 House Ethics Manual.
Hold on, this is not from your report. This is
it is from the report, but the citations within the report are to the House Ethics Manual.
Okay, so we would definitely, Conrad, want to make sure that we are including the fact that the report itself is citing the House Ethics Manual. So I mean, I hear the concerns raised by Dave and others, but I do wonder, like, this is directly from the report and it's directly speaking to what the House Ethics rule. And so I do wonder whether it makes sense to keep it in with this reference to some of the underlying support. So Andy, do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I think it's much better now, and would be interested in hearing what Dave thinks.
Okay, so Dave, if you want to get your hand up in a second, that'd be great, but let me go to Bernie.
Oh, I was surprised. I'm actually surprised at Andy's reaction because it looks like we're citing congressional ethics rules against Congress, which I thought we were trying to stay away from. I would have thought this would possibly be more of a red flag to Congress in terms of citing their own ethics manuals. But if Andy thinks it's fine, I'm fine with it.
Okay. I mean, maybe the idea is that it's not citing in an oppositional way. It's citing in a we hear you way, and we're all complying with the law that we all agree in because we live in a rule of law society. So I think that may be, anyway, just trying to square that circle. Okay, Dave.
I think that it helps to take out the ideally here. I think that we just don't want to be in a position of telling agencies that they should not be more responsive to members of Congress. I think they should be more responsive to members of Congress, and we don't want to dissuade them from doing that. Now, Does that mean that we think that they should always get to move people up first in line or these kinds of things? No, but they should be particularly responsive to members of Congress because they do have a privileged role. And so in the current language where it says in most circumstances, this should not matter and everybody should be treated equally, that's fine. If we say ideally, everybody should be treated equally, then you're sort of leaning in the direction of saying, don't give members of Congress special attention. Don't listen to them particularly. And I think that's the world we want to avoid. And I think that that's Andy's sentiment as well. So I would just say, as almost as if a matter of fact, in most circumstances, these things should be treated the same. But here we go, because we don't want to be in a world that's telling agencies don't be more responsive to Congress.
I think, isn't that some of the work that Jack's second sentence is doing, that Jack's sentence is doing, right? Like, so this is why Jack is sort of saying that that sentence is important in aligned with Bernie's first sentence. So Jack's sentence is, however, these casework requests often appear to be helpful in ensuring appropriate agency action. And so I guess my response, Dave, is there a way, which of the versions of the first sentence, the Bernie sentence, would help you make it clear, that really this is about making sure agencies are acting appropriately in the first place and not waiting for a congressional inquiry to do their work? And then, do you have a suggested revision to Jack's sentence?
Yeah, let me answer that question specifically and then make kind of a meta point. My answer specifically is, I think in taking out the word ideally in advance there in that first sentence has helped take away the normative, like you all should think this way about the way that you should be responsive, helps a lot. And I don't think we need the footnote that was suggested. So I am better with this current formulation than the earlier formulation. I mean, my preference overall would be, because we're disagreeing about this is exactly why I don't think it belonged in the preamble, was because it is a contestable statement about which I don't think we need to take a stand given the recommendations that we have. That said, like, if this was the language that was there, I can live with this. Like I said, I just don't think that we want to be in a world of taking a position about whether being extra responsive to members of Congress is a good or bad thing.
Here's what I predict. I think if we don't have this language in, somebody on the floor is going to raise it. And then we reduplicate this argument on the floor without the benefit of language to be discussing. So I guess and where I'm a little bit reading the weight of interest in the room right now, including Andy's kind of revision with the footnote, et cetera, is that the weight of the room seems to think, I think that the sentences are important. And given what I think would happen on the floor if we don't have them, I think my instinct is to keep them in and then wordsmith them so that they do not have the normative concern that Dave was raising. So I think that's the universe I'd like to be working towards now, kind of structurally and in substance with the language, unless I hear strong concerns to the contrary, because I think we've articulated the various competing views and kind of worked language down to be a little finer at this point. Dave, is your hand up still or again?
Yeah, I just, and again, I promised that my last statement was 2 comments ago, so I now really, this will be the last comment.
You never have to promise that. It's a meeting.
It's
You're
an incredible
talk.
I mean, part of this is, I think, like a law thing versus a politics thing, right? Like,
yeah,
we want to believe in the rule of law, but the proper function of an elected representative is to represent people, and that means picking winners and losers. And sometimes your job is to use the discretion you have to help pick winners and losers, or act on behalf of some interests and not on others. And that's a legitimate representational function. We can pick extreme cases in either way, which are inappropriate. And I agree with those cases being inappropriate. But elected officials do make decisions about who gets money and who doesn't, who gets grants and who doesn't, who gets contracts and who doesn't, who gets access to certain processes and who doesn't. And that's a legitimate representational role for different groups in society that can't all be governed by law or rule. And that's the point, right? Is that it's okay for elected officials to have that kind of power, not unlimited, but in some cases and in particular ways. And that's why we have elections. That's the bigger point.
Okay, I hear that. Andy, then Bill, then Jack.
Thanks. First of all, I just want to make sure, Eloise, that in your proposed going forward with the text, it includes the exclusion of the word ideally.
Yes.
Okay, all right, because that's important to softening it. And if I had my druthers, I would go along with David Lewis, and and don't think it's necessary here at all. But I sense the strong opinion on the other side, and I also appreciate Bernie Bell's concern about the footnote. I think there's something to that. But, given where we are and where the split, then, it seems to me that going forward as you propose is the right thing to do.
Okay. So I take and really hear, Dave, your concern, and Andy, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts as well. And Jim, I think you fell a little bit into this line too, but I think I'm hearing the weight going the other way. And so in the interest of kind of moving forward now, I think that's what we should do, is be wordsmithing this down, and we'll see what happens on the floor. I do really think if we don't have it, it would get added in, and then there'd be this debate on the floor. We may have this debate on the floor anyway, and this whole conversation that we've had will, I think, inform some of that. And maybe my prediction is wrong anyway, so we'll see. Okay, Bill, then Jack.
Well, as I said, I've never disagreed with David on the point that Congress ought to be able to get a stronger thumb on the scale. So, and I didn't think this language did it, but at the risk of opening another can of worms,
Ooh,
would it help if it said, in most circumstances, the resolution of an individual's issue should not require the individual to seek assistance from an elected representative, rather than interacting directly with an agency? I think that's the idea here. I think Bernie nodding that this was the idea. You shouldn't have to go to the representative, but if you're not going to get results from the agency, well, then yeah, it's entirely appropriate for Congress to put a thumb on the scales. I didn't want to suggest otherwise.
Yeah, I like that, and I also think it is what Bernie was trying to get at originally. So, Bernie, does that?
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit different from what I'm trying to get at, but I'm fine with it, given
Okay.
the concerns.
Okay.
If other people think that resolves it, the kind of most important part of the point is still there, and
Okay.
we can get consensus.
Okay, all right. Thanks for that, Bernie. Jack.
I think that's a terrific suggestion, and I just think we can even take some of the words out. You could say, in most circumstances, the resolution of an individual's issue should not require the assistance of an individual's elected representative. I think
Perfect.
that, and then the point that I wanted to raise, though, when I raised my hand, was the next sentence, in my opinion, ought to be the sentence about how casework can be helpful. And this is why I think any sting people might feel about this looks like a criticism of Congress. For agencies, congressional casework requests may reveal. So the next sentence, I think, should be the how agencies are helped by this.
Great. Okay. So
not
let's
the one about
oversight.
About oversight, but the one
Yeah.
about how it helps the agencies also. So I would move the what's now the last sentence up to right after this one. And again, I've always said we should leave the oversight one to the end.
So Conrad, don't move that. Don't move that. That shouldn't get moved. Don't move that. So what we do want to move is in line 17, for agencies, congressional casework requests may reveal. Sure, that. So move that to after Jack's proposed insert. So in line 14, we're not there. Line 14.
Right there, yeah.
Yeah, right
where
there.
we are now.
Okay, so can we clean this up and then let's see where we are. So Conrad, could you go to line 8, please, and delete the also? Okay, so then.
So where did we land on
Yeah,
the formulation?
Okay, so in most circumstances, the resolution of an individual's issue should, and then delete the open bracket, not require the assistance of the individual. Change the there to the individual. elected representative, period. Delete everything up until footnote 2. Delete the extra period. However, these casework requests often appear to be helpful in ensuring appropriate agency action. Okay, and then we can move on to the rest. Our people, what do we think about those 2 sentences as they currently read? Andy? You're on mute.
I like this. Thank you to the proposers here. I would just suggest now that we don't need footnote 2, or actually it's footnote 1.
No, it's footnote 2, right? Because it's
2,
something different.
right? 2,
But yeah,
2,
footnote
correct.
2. Okay, and why is that? Because we're no longer talking about ethics. We don't need to get into anything.
Yeah, we don't have to temper anything or explain anything anymore.
Okay. Okay, Bernie?
Yeah, so what I guess this is kind of a new point that's coming into this, but it stems from what Sean has quoted, which is apparently part of what happens in these casework requests is that the member of Congress is kind of managing the expectations of the constituents. So should that actually be in here somewhere? Because I think that's an important point.
But is it though? Can I just push back on that slightly?
Okay.
Because this is about agencies, not about Congress, and we don't need to be telling Congress what to do. So that is an important point maybe for congressional training, but we're not making this recommendation. Maybe I'm missing the point about what you're saying, but why would this be an important point to put into the discussion in this context? I think I might be missing what you're saying.
I mean, I don't want to kind of extend this discussion in length, but it just seems to me we're talking about some of the elements of what constituent service is and what it does. And the report suggests that one of those elements is that it actually helps the agency by having a member of Congress actually manage the expectation of the person who's dealing with the agency.
I misunderstood what you're saying. Okay, so let's think about whether that fits into the sentence about how it can be helpful to agencies. For agencies, congressional casework requests may reveal broader systemic problems with agency policies or procedures that, if addressed, the sentence is very long. That, if addressed, might provide more expeditious relief to those otherwise inclined to seek help from their member of Congress, reduce the volume of casework requests submitted to the agency, and provide appropriate relief for those who cannot or will not invoke the assistance of members of Congress. So are you suggesting that something about the managing expectations be embedded into the sentence?
I think I would make it a separate sentence. That sentence is already very long.
Yeah.
So I would try to find some place
Okay.
to just say that. And if we can't, I mean, unless other people feel strongly about it, then we can just drop it because it's late in the process.
Okay.
But if we can find some place, it reflects the report, and it sets up some general background for what the recommendation is doing.
Okay, Jack?
Yeah, I have to say that on this one, I think less is more. I would just take out everything after procedures. I would just say for agencies, congressional case requests may reveal broader systemic problems with agency policies or procedures, and not talk about how they're addressed or any other relationship to anything that Congress. We're not trying. I mean, the idea here isn't to reduce casework; it's to get the agencies to work better. That's what I would do.
Okay, could you put brackets around that, Conrad? And Conrad, can you also, after where your cursor is, can you just do a new sentence with bracket that says managing constituents expectations ? And close bracket so that we don't lose the thread of Bernie's question? Okay, Bill?
I like Jack's suggestion, and I'm not really supportive of Bernie's suggestion. I mean, if we were going to be very specific about a lot of different things, it might have a thing, but this is a preamble. It's supposed to be short. It's not supposed to be comprehensive, I don't think. So I think, like Jack said, less is more.
Okay, so what do you think about that, Bernie? If we shorten it to just systemic problems with agencies, policies, or procedures, period, without weighing in on all the other stuff, which would include both the constituent expectations and then everything else in the first bracket.
I mean, my inclination would be not to cut it because we're talking to agencies about the benefits of finding programmatic solutions that make casework requests unnecessary. And so we're trying to convince the agencies that that would be a good thing to do because it saves them work in terms of the number of constituent requests, because presumably the fewer constituent requests you have, actually the more resources you have for other things. And if you kind of care about getting it right, doing it expeditiously is a benefit. And also, again, if you kind of care about getting it right, you want people who don't go to Congress to also get the right answer. So it seems to me this is addressed to agencies to point out specific benefits of going the extra mile and looking at these casework requests and seeing if you can do something differently to have the program run correctly rather than have it be fixed through casework requests.
Okay, John?
I think that I'm supportive of less and putting a period after procedures and deleting the rest of that paragraph.
Including the oversight role? There's a separate thought there about oversight.
Yeah, I know, but we're just saying too much.
Okay. It sounds to me like the weight of the room is moving towards less is more, Bernie. But I welcome other hands up if I'm looking around for other hands. If anybody wants to say that my thought is different here than what's really happening. I did wonder, though, whether John's latest suggestion to cut everything was where the weight of the room is, because I haven't actually heard that. So I might suggest that we, Conrad, cut to there, and then, because I don't know that I have the full weight of the room. So Bernie, I hope that sits with you okay, given where I think the weight of the room is. Yeah, okay. Bill.
Well, I think less is more generally too, but I thought this next sentence about oversight was important. I mean, I think it's a separate idea from what is the initial sentence. So it's not the thing with Bernie's. I thought everything was sort of encompassed within the language, even if it wasn't specified. But I think this oversight is an important other issue, and it's short enough and concise enough that I think it doesn't detract from anything.
Okay, so unless I hear otherwise, I think let's do less is more on the first sentence, but keep the second sentence as a separate idea. So we now are going to delete everything from line 14 for agencies through really the rest of, yeah, because we've now incorporated that. So this is the way the paragraph currently reads. So how are people with this? So why don't you take a minute to just look at it? Conrad, there's a missing space or an extra space, yeah. I'll call on you in a second, Andy. I'm just looking for letting people read for a second.
Okay.
Okay, Andy.
I just wanted to ask what people thought about my suggestion that we delete the second footnote now.
I think we did that.
We
We
did
did.
that,
Is
okay.
Yeah. John?
For some parallelism, how about, it says for agencies, congressional case, whoops.
Oh, sorry about that.
For agencies, congressional casework requests may reveal, and then for Congress,
Congress.
casework requests, and that way you're creating a parallel.
Yeah. Also play an important role in oversight. So delete the word congressional in line 11.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a lot of compromise reflected in this language, a lot of hashing through, a lot of competing ideas. I think we did it, and I think we should take a break now. But I also invite people to take another look at the paragraph on the break, because if you want to come back, that's kind of when we'll have another couple of minutes to revisit anything that anybody wants to revisit. And then we're going to move through the rest of the preamble where there's many fewer comments suggested. So I think it should be easier. So let's come back at 3:35. So that's about 8 minutes. And we'll start again. Okay, thanks everybody. I'll see you then. Start recording again. And then why don't we get your screen back up? So I asked everybody just to take a quick look again at the paragraph that we just spent a lot of time on. I noticed one quick parallelism thing that I want to suggest that we add. So in line 9 and 10, we now say for agencies, congressional casework requests may reveal. And so I want to suggest that we use the word may again in the next sentence. So for Congress, casework requests may also play, just so that we're not putting the weight of fact more on one or the other. So if that's okay with everybody, I'd like to suggest that. And then did anybody else have anything they want to say before we move on to the next paragraph? Okay, let's move on to the next paragraph. So Conrad, can you get it so the whole paragraph is up? Okay. And can we see the footnote too? Can you get it so that we can see footnote 2? I don't know if there's a way to do your screens that we can do that. That would be too small now.
Yeah, I can split them. Give me 2 moments.
Yeah. Okay.
What in the world? There we go. Split. So here's paragraph 2, and the footnote is there.
Okay, great. Thank you. So let's take a minute to look at paragraph 2 from starting in line 14, as well as footnote 2. Conrad, can you scroll up so that we don't see lines 36 and 37? So we just see the footnote. I think it's going to be a little more straightforward. In the bottom of your split screens? Yeah, perfect. Okay, so let's take a minute to look at that, and then I'll ask for hands if anybody has any comments. Can you go back to
the clean view? Yeah.
Well, was there any, maybe we don't need to be in the clean view. Were there any comments in this one?
Nope. No comments in paragraph 2.
Well, then keep it, but we're going to start, I want to see where there are comments. Let's keep it this way. Okay, does anybody have any comments on this paragraph? Okay, let's move to the next one. So let's do the,
Do you still want them split, or can I remove the split?
I think you can remove the split because we don't need to, we can see the whole thing here. So.
Over here we go.
But I think we're still up. We haven't, this is a.
Here we go.
Yeah, this is what we need. So nobody suggested any comments on the paragraph that begins at line 21. And so let's start looking at the paragraph that begins at line 25, where we have a bunch of suggestions. One of which was, Conrad, can you make bigger both that comment and then Bernie's comment below?
Unfortunately, I can
maybe not at the same time. Okay. All right. So let's look at the, so everybody look at Bernie's revising. Okay. Look at Conrad. Let's just pick one. Look at Bernie's. I suggest revising as indicated to avoid splitting clauses that should be together. I think it's more reasonable as revised. But might be even more readable if agency offices of ombudsman could just read agency ombuds. Okay, so that's a sentence we'll have to work on. And then Conrad, can you make your paragraph a little bigger so that language and footnote added here to implement the comment from one of our meetings in late March to include language in the preamble that acknowledges the existence of alternative avenues for assistance such as ombuds, and noting that these processes differ in both mechanisms and equities and reference relevant ACUS regs. Okay, so, and the footnote then is a footnote to what? A footnote to a use on ombuds, the recommendation, and the underlying report. Okay, so I welcome comments on this paragraph about organizational differences in how agencies handle casework requests. Bill.
I thought the language without the assistance of their elected representatives was unnecessary. I mean, we're all talking about how agencies direct things. I mean, they're all without assistance of elected representatives.
Okay, was that from Bernie or was that from? I
So
don't think that
the
one was from
language,
Bernie.
the language without the assistance of their elected representatives was included in the initial version that we inserted, and then Bernie proposed that we shift it to before such as through.
But I don't
Okay, but
see
we
why
don't
it's-
need it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So let's just delete
Right.
it without the assistance of their elected representatives, because the whole point is that it's directly from the agency. Okay, did you have another comment, Bill, or that was
Nope,
the one
that's
you
it.
wrote down? Okay,
That's it.
great. David, with hopes we can hear you. We heard you before. So if you take yourself off mute, we'll have a better chance though. No, we can't hear you. I don't know why we could hear you when you came back to the, did you do something different? Because we definitely heard you when you came back. You and I had a conversation about. Okay, I don't know what to say. Put it in the chat. Go ahead if you want it, it's not worth it. Okay, fine. So do we have any, Bernie, do you want to talk about your various ombuds options here?
I don't think there's a lot to say. We've excised thing that needs to be
Great.
moved, and I like through agency ombuds, but
Great. So
that
then
can
if
be
you,
the
yeah,
other one
so
as
then
well.
let's delete the stuff in brackets. We'll accept the deletion that's deleted. And so it's short and sweet. So the sentence will say, still others provide alternative avenues for members of the public to seek redress of grievances directly from the agency, such as through agency ombuds, period, citation to the ACUS recommendation. Okay, I think that's good. All right, so that was the paragraph on organizational variations. Now we have the paragraph on technological variations, although I guess we'll let Conrad accept that.
Well, let me accept them all at the same time this go around. Okay.
I think you had too much selected.
Makes sense.
Okay, and then we can get rid of those recommendations. Okay, so now here, the only suggestion, okay, hold on. David did put his comment in the chat to that previous paragraph. And so his comment in the chat is that, this is on the organizational paragraph. His comment in the chat is that I thought it odd to call direct action from the agency to be an alternative since it should be a norm. That is not, that is a other point. Provide other avenues, provide, because ombuds, yeah, maybe other is better to capture that.
then you had two others.
Oh yes, you're right. Additional, does every agency have an ombuds? No? Okay, then I think additional will do the trick. Okay. So can we go ahead and accept that? David, thanks for your patience and participation, even though we can't hear you. I appreciate the chat function. Okay, so moving on to the technological paragraph, just changing are adopting to are employing, since they're actually using it, not just insisting that they're using it or asserting that they're using it. Does this seem fine to people? We are citing the relevant ACUS
about-
recommendations and reports.
How about while others employ rather than are employing?
Yeah, that's even has the benefit of not just being shorter, but also parallel. Okay, anything else? All right, let's go to the next paragraph. And this one we might have to, we need to be able to see the, oh great, there's no footnote. So we're okay, there was no footnote. So we're looking at the paragraph from line 35 to 39 now. Anything people want to add here, suggest or comment on? Okay, let's move to the next paragraph, the one that begins at line 40. About different legal and regulatory requirements. So let's Conrad, I think we need to, yeah, and then can you move up so that we don't see line 58 and 59 in the bottom screen? Yeah, that's perfect. So let's take a look at this paragraph that begins at line 40 and see if anybody has any comments. So Michael, I think this is what I was thinking about in the preamble when you raised your comment about enforcement agencies before. I know we have a comment in the recommendations also about what they're not able to share. I don't know if you have a view on this paragraph or if anybody else has a view on this paragraph.
Michael, unfortunately, was pulled away by other obligations. So
Okay, all right. Okay, great. So anybody have any views on this paragraph? Okay, so I think you can get rid of the split screen then, Conrad, because I think we are just going to the last thing in the preamble. Cheryl, are you still here, Cheryl?
Cheryl could not be with us today, unfortunately.
No,
Oh, no, she's here.
Oh, sorry
Yeah.
about that.
My heart
Yeah.
stops in 15 minutes.
So you suggested operate under different statutory requirements.
Yeah, it was just, we were talking about all the different things that agencies.
Yeah,
That
sure.
just seems to be one missing. That I don't care what the wording is. It was just the concept of your enabling statute sometimes has parameters in it as well.
Great. Okay, and then who added the stuff in green in line 56, Conrad?
Green is
Eloise?
also a comment from Cheryl, and then purple is from Bernie, or excuse
Okay.
me, Jack.
Okay,
Oh, no, this
great.
is Bernie, excuse me.
Okay, and Bill, yes, go ahead. I see your hand now, sorry.
Yeah, I have no problem with Cheryl's first addition, but you'll have to add after it and have different resources available to them
Yes, because we need a verb there. Great.
right here.
Could we theoretically shift it here?
No,
No, okay.
no. better
Each
there.
thing needs a verb. Yeah.
Yeah.
And my second comment I view is just a proposal for the well, I guess no, it's because it's not just the program. There's a lot of unique things for the agency. The program is just part of what's unique for that agency, whether it's regulatory constraints. So I just try to
Sure.
broaden
So how about we just say tailor these best practices to it? Oh no, to their, it's plural before, to their unique circumstances, and then we don't need any of that. Is that okay? Okay, right, so Conrad, can you do that? Bill, is your hand up again or still? Okay. And then Bernie, you wanted to offer this. Conrad, can you make his comment bigger? And then Bernie, you want to just explain it?
Yeah, sure. So there was a concern a long time ago. I think John actually initially raised it about the kind of lack of uniformity in SOPs. And so this was meant to kind of soften it a little bit from suggesting that agencies should tailor these practices to the unique circumstances to may need to. So they shouldn't feel compulsion to do things differently and try as much as possible to be somewhat uniform.
So reactions to the difference between should and may need to, John or anyone else? John, you're fine with it? Yeah, I see a nod. Okay. Okay, so I hear nothing to the contrary, so let's go ahead and do that. So I think that takes us to the end of the preamble. Dave?
Sorry, this is just a question for the wordsmiths, and that last paragraph, that one sentence has the word different in it about 5 or 6 times, and I wonder whether we should think of some other terms, but that may be just a style thing for me.
Is there some, like, is the idea though, a little bit of the it's not alliteration, but the repetitiveness kind of reinforces like different. I was gonna try and come up with a different word for my section, and then I looked at it and thought they kind of did, it looks like they did it on purpose to just kind of like hammer home there's a lot of differences, but that may have just been my read of it.
Yeah, that's fine. There are people who are better writers on this call than I am, so I'm happy to defer. I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you for that. Bernie?
I don't claim to be a better writer, but it would seem to me one of the classic ways you would deal with this is just take out a lot of the difference. So receive different volumes of casework requests, serve. Oh, okay. I guess you can't.
I think we can't because they all have a different verb. Yeah,
Okay.
we could do it by
yeah,
something
okay.
like, I have an idea, but I think it's not as good as what's currently here. We could do it something like, of course, agencies differ along many different lines, comma, including the volumes of casework requests, but then you need to add verbs after they receive, the different communities they serve, operational needs under which they operate. Like, I just think it introduces too much. So I'm sorry, Dave, but I think in fixing it, we would create other awkwardnesses. And I think it might be easier and more streamlined to stick with different, if that's okay, multiple times.
Totally fine. Just trying to be a good committee member, and
yes,
in my previous experience at the plenary, if there's a better way to say it, someone will recommend it.
Oh, for sure. And it may well be true that I will be completely wrong on the floor and someone will find the one thing that captures all of this magisterially, and there we'll go. I mean, we could try to do this now, but I'm not sure, given the hard work we've done, that it makes sense to kind of puzzle through wordsmithing this particular sentence anymore. Conrad, did I see anything else? Are there any comments that didn't get right? Like, this is just a note to you that we have to update all cross references. Okay, and there's nothing else. There's no other stray comment that we didn't attend to. Okay, so I think the exciting moment has come to vote. Do I have that correctly, Conrad? Are we voting? Okay, so Conrad, can you refresh my recollection as the method by which we vote here?
Well, I think election of the method of voting is one of the
okay, the chair's
privilege of the chair. We could go through a voice vote or unanimous consent.
I'm totally comfortable with but I think it might be a little nice to hear resounding yeses. So I would be comfortable, rather than asking for a voice vote, rather than saying unanimous consent, I would be comfortable if people could go to unmute themselves and say yes if they vote to accept the. So should we do that? if you vote in favor of the preamble and the recommendations as it currently stands, I think it's probably aye that we're supposed to say. Okay, so say aye if you vote to accept the preamble. Go ahead. 1, 2,
Aye.
3.
Aye.
Aye.
I,
See,
I vote for-
resounding. Isn't that satisfying?
I vote
Okay.
for Eloise.
Now ask for the nays.
Well, of course I'm going to ask for the nays. Yeah, of course. Anybody who'd like to vote nay? Okay, well, I think we've done some excellent work here, and I'm grateful to all of you for all of the hard work, both leading into today's session and throughout our minutes of collaboration. So thank you so much for that. I think, is there anything else that I have to formally say to you? I don't think there's anything else. I just looked at the notes that Conrad sent me in advance. So I think we're good. So I will hope to see everybody at the plenary, which is on Thursday, June
13th.
13th, Thursday, June 13th, and we'll do our thing, and with any luck, we'll get it through, and I'm grateful to everybody. So thanks so much for this great meeting. Thanks to the ACUS staff for pulling us together, and to Sean for a great report, and to everybody who's done all their work here. So see you later, everybody.
And thank
Bye.
you,
Thank you.
Eloise. And thank you,
Yeah.
everyone.
So much,
Great
everyone.
job.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Have an excellent
Bye,
weekend.
everybody. You too, everybody. Take care. Bye.